Hello. In this video, I'm going to be showing basic authorization after you have authentication in an app. So I'm going to be using a simple React-based authentication login, logout setup from a previous video that I can link below in the description. And what that's going to allow us to do is talk to a PocketBase backend that in this case is just running on localhost 8090 without TLS, so just HTTP. And so the command to do that, once I have the PocketBase server that I've run previously ready to go, I'll just serve and accept on any IP address on port 8090, and then the admin dashboard is here, and the API is /API. So if you just go to slash, and of course this is localhost, not 000. If you just go to slash underscore, it'll take you to the login here, and then if you go to slash, you'll see this message, and that's just because you have flexibility to serve your front end from slash, so slash underscore is where the admin portal is. And so I'll do the admin login, which is stored. I think it'll work better if I actually go to 127.0.0 instead of localhost specifically. And there I can, it logs me in using Google Password Manager, and we can see the users table with the one user, a@a.com. And so this is, Appleson or something. And let's say we have a different user in here called b@b.com. They have their own password. We'll verify them and call them Bingson. And it's just we have two users that we can associate with different data. So then let's create just like a to-dos database, or a table, sorry. So that's a collection, and this will be, it automatically will have created and updated. We can actually remove those if we want though, so I'm just going to remove those. And then it's going to have an ID automatically, which is going to auto assign. So I'll just make a plain text called text of the to-do. And then I will make also an owner who's going to be in PocketBase a relation. So this will be connecting to the users table, and it will be called the owner, and it's going to be a single relation. There can only be one owner, and others cannot view it. If you wanted to have like a access granted to, then you could do a multiple and have multiple say access granted users. And I'm going to cascade delete, meaning if we delete the user, it will also delete the rows in this to-dos table related to that user. And then I'll create that. And by default, if I click on this table's settings again and look at the API rules, we'll see by default super users only can access the data in this table, and that's so that we can't leak this data to the users of the app. If we unlock it, everyone can access everything, which is obviously not what we want. So let's say we just want to do the list and search, and we let anyone access it. Then if I have a to-do in here that I'm not the owner of, I still would be able to get it. So let's see how this will work. If we log in, our login is working same as before, and I'll go into the code here. And we have the token in state from the authentication portion. So the token is in state right now, and we log out, it gets cleared. We log back in, we have the token again. So what we're going to need to do is create a new service here, get rid of the previous code. So it'll be services, new file called todos.js, and we'll make a function, an async function, read todos with my token, and from there follow a similar pattern to this. So the API URL will just be hard-coded, and then the URL is going to be API collections to-dos records, and I could check that in the PocketBase docs. But I can also check it in the admin portal. They actually give you an API preview. So I could see if I want to list and search, for example, I can do a get on to-do records and give a authorization token header to authorize the user. So if I have a const options, the method's going to be get, which is implied in a fetch request, and the content type's going to be JSON, and the authorization, it's either going to have to look like, usually APIs are going to expect you to use a bearer token in this format, but PocketBase will actually also just accept your token plain without the word bearer in the space. But just keep in mind that bearer token is more typical to see. And then what you'll do is just fetch, and if the response is not okay, you can console.log the response and throw new error that the network response was not okay. Go into main and import read todos from services todos.js, and then we have to export read todos as a named export to do that. Now we can add into the logged in view a button to fetch the to-dos. So just like this one, except instead of logging out, we will get to-dos, and instead of setting the token to null, we'll read to-dos, and then console.log the data for now, and console.log the error if there's an error. Something's weird is happening with the styles here. We need to just export read to-dos like that. And then I'll just quickly change this CSS so that all kinds of buttons are formatted like this. And so I'll log out, log in, get to-dos, and it says 404, which means not found. And if we check the access controls, that makes sense because super users only can list. So if we let anyone, which is pretty insecure, then let's see what happens. Now we click get to-dos and we see still getting a 404. Okay, and in both cases, we weren't having a problem viewing that, so let's set this back. It was just not finding any rows, which makes sense because there are no rows in the table. So let's grant this to super users only again. And let's do a new to-do with database to do item 1. And I'll let this auto generate, and I'll leave it with no owner for now. So now we get a 404. And we have a misspelling on the table name of to-do. Should be to-dos, needs to match to-dos right here. So now we check and we get 403 forbidden, which is correct because the only super user should have access to this particular table now. But if we add onto here API rules that anyone can list and search, and then we try again, now we see the items has the rows, the single row, which has the text database to do item 1. And you see this should work even if we don't have an authorization token, which is bad news because that means anyone who can access our API, say on the open internet, could access the data in our database. So that would not be desirable. So the first step you could take to mitigate that would be to add an access rule for this so that only people who have an account, or basically where they provide a token that goes to a valid account, are going to be able to access the data. So that would just let anyone view all data as long as they're logged in. So if we check the docs on this, examples would be like if request.auth.id is not equal to empty quotes. So essentially once the authentication middleware inside of PocketBase figures out who the token belongs to, if there is a token, then it will not allow anyone who doesn't have a legitimate ID in the system. So if we save the changes and then we go back to our app and we get to-dos, we get a to-do back. But if we don't send our token, then we should not get that. Oh yeah, so array's 0. I wasn't noticing that, so I'm just going to console.log down here data.items. So we have an empty array right there. And then if we send the token, either the bearer format or the other format, then we get to do in both cases. Now, what if we have that, but it's not connected to our user, it's connected to a different user? So we have this owner idea that you should only be able to see, to-dos that are yours. So we're currently Appleson. So if we make the owner Bingson and then try to get the data, we're still going to be able to do this. So we see that the owner is not us, but we still are able to fetch that. So that typically would not make sense for this type of app setup. You can also go in here and make sure that this is not empty, so that there has to be an owner for it to do. That wasn't true before, but now we have an owner, so that could be true. And we could do the same for the text, for example. Now to make this rule work, we can follow this pattern where this is the case of a multi-relation, but it'll also work with a single relation, and is basically trying to check if the to-do is allowed to be accessed by the particular logged in user. So if we add an and, so they have to be logged in and valid, but they also have to be the particular user who is marked on, in this case, owner dot ID. Then we save the changes, and now when we go to get the to-dos, we get empty because we are not the owner. Whereas if here this owner was in fact us instead of being the other owner, then now we get back the to-do. So finally, let's just add that to the view for this simple read case. So we'll make a function to-do list that will take the to-dos and a clear to-dos function, and it will just return a React fragment for an unordered list, and map the to-do. We will destructure the to-do into ID and content, or whatever we call this, text, and return a list item. We don't need a delete button, and then just a UL closing tag and a button to clear the to-dos out. I think there's still a syntax error somewhere here. Oh, I don't know why I'm in the to-dos JS here. Make an unordered list. Map the ID and text of the to-do to a key, the text, and finally a clear button like that. And then we'll create a state variable, and when the to-dos come through, we will set the to-dos, and then if the to-dos is not empty or not undefined, then actually it's always going to probably be a list, so we should be fine. But anyway, you can do to-do list, pass in the to-dos, and clear to-dos that sets to-dos to the empty array. Make sure that use state is imported. And now we get to-dos, we get the database to-do item, and then we clear to-dos, we clear it out. And it's pretty much that simple to get a simple read from PocketBase. So to recap what we've done, we set up a new table in PocketBase, created a sample row, and then used the settings of the table to create API rules for who can access the data in the table and who can change it. So by default, only super users, which is like what I'm logged into this admin portal with, can make these changes, but you can make it so that logged in app users can do things with this particular rule, and then you can add more specific rules related to who is referenced, maybe users that are referenced in relations on the table, in order to get better authorization for authenticated users to access particular data within a table. And you could apply this same type of rule strategy to all the different things you want to do, like deleting, updating, creating, or viewing. The difference here between listing and viewing is that list is to view kind of like a list of options, obviously, from say a collection, whereas view is more like looking at a specific row by its ID. So they're both view actions or read actions, but one is viewing or reading multiple and the other is viewing or reading one item. So that should conclude this video. Thank you for watching.